video is designed to talk you through the factors which hinder development. There's no background information for this section. However, I would just like to make it clear that we are talking expressly about less economically developed countries, and particularly those sub-Saharan countries, some of the poorest countries throughout the world. And basically the rest of the explanation focuses on why these countries are in the development state that they are. The red area that you can see here says that students should be able to know and understand the factors that have hindered development in LEDCs. It says you need to make reference to places for illustration purposes only. So the best students will make reference to real places, however it's not a specific case study question. There are 5 main factors: historical factors, environmental factors, dependence on primary activities, debt and politics. If you come across and have a look at your GCSE e-book, you will see that those factors occur in that order. The first historical factor is corruption. This basically states that a number of LEDCs have had corrupt and unstable governments in the past. This has made it difficult for these countries to secure aid and attract trade from large multinational companies. This means that there's less investment in infrastructure and they have been held back in terms of their development and economic growth. The second factor relates to the environmental problems, and that is natural hazards. Natural hazards such as floods, droughts and earthquakes all occur in LEDCs and therefore hinder economic development. These natural hazards do also occur in MEDCs. However, the MEDCs are much more prepared and have much better contingency plans put in place to manage them, so they have less of an impact on their economic development. The third factor is their dependence on primary activities. If we look at any of these LEDCs, the highest proportion of people are employed in primary industries such as fishing, farming, mining, whereas in the MEDCs the highest proportion of people are employed in tertiary industries. The price of raw materials produced from these primary industries is much lower than services and products which are produced in tertiary industries. These prices also fluctuate greatly, so the LEDC countries typically do not have a reliable source of income. The illustration that we have here is that Zambia has 98% of its exports in copper. If the world price or world demand for copper drops, then obviously Zambia has big problems in terms of generating money from its exports. Fourth factor is a political factor, and basically this talks about colonialism. Colonialism occurred from the 16th century onwards, where MEDCs like France and the UK took control of LEDCs, mainly in Africa, like Algeria. This helped the LEDCs as sometimes they developed a good road network or education system. However, this really benefited the MEDCs. Many of the LEDCs had their natural resources stripped and used by the MEDCs to generate a lot of wealth for them, so that left problems for the LEDCs. As colonialism continued into the 1970s, it became popular for the MEDCs to relinquish political control of their former dependencies. So when these LEDCs regained their own personal political control, they took loans from MEDCs and large banks. For example, Ecuador borrowed $3 billion from the USA in 1970. This was purchased really to improve infrastructure and promote development. However, a lot of the money wasn't spent properly, and there were huge interest rates applied to these loans. The LEDCs then were unable to pay this back, and the debt has grown massively. This reduces the amount of money available for development, as they are using that money to repay loans. So therefore, those are the 5 main factors that have contributed to the development levels that we see in LEDCs. If we come across and have a look at this example question in your ebook, we can see that explain is the command word, which means give reasons. How historical factors have hindered development. You should mention places in your answer. So if we come across and attempt to write a plan answer, okay, There's no specific case study, so we'll not start by stating a case study. I would start by selecting probably the political factor, because I believe it is the best factor that we can talk about. So I would choose that political factor, and then I would make my point, explain, expand, and we can see in there that we make reference to places like Algeria. The second point, explain, expand I would use in this answer is the debt point, which talks about Ecuador borrowing $3 billion from the USA in 1970. So again, we've got a point, explain, answer, and we're referring to two fact-figure places throughout. Let's have a look at the mark scheme. You can see here that a full explanation of how historical factors hinder development, which refers to place. So you can see how our answer does both of those things to allow us to access 6 marks. Let's look at the example answer. Some countries such as Britain ruled other countries like Kenya. Refers to place. This was known as colonialism. These new two territories became known as colonies, and they became part of an empire. These countries such as the UK, Spain and France took resources and wealth from these colonies, usually in the 17th and 18th centuries. So that's worth sort of 3 or 4 marks. These resources were used by rich countries to become richer at the expense of poorer countries, worth 5 marks. Richer countries such as Britain left these countries to become independent, and these fledgling countries have struggled to create wealth and prosperity due to the way they were governed in the past, for 6 marks. It also says here, other valid answers include dictatorship, debt and war. Debt is one of the factors that we chose to use in our answer. Political and